I guess we'll start with the preliminary stuff and give time for people to trickle in if they come in late. You have a packet, hopefully either at your seat or on the seat next to you. The first one I draw your attention to is the recently promulgated Code of Conduct from the United Nations. Now, I have the caveat there that as far as I know, it has not yet been determined how various organs in this building are going to be harmonizing or instituting that code of conduct. But out of abundance of caution, when we have meetings like this, we're supposed to adhere to it. I think a lot of it is common sense, but it's good to know it, so I'm giving it to you, even though you're wherever I don't know where everyone comes from, obviously, but I know in the discussions that I had just the other day with the person in charge of it, they still haven't even gone to the registrar, so I don't know if it's being implemented yet, but out of abundance of caution, I always like to give everyone all of the details. Shouldn't be a problem, but of course, if you feel that anything has been, if you do have problems with anything, please feel free to come to me after the lecture, and I'll be happy to discuss. The rest of the documentation are handouts that you can keep with you. They're your copy. You can refer back to them, you can read them, you can take notes, you can highlight things. Hopefully you will be urged to look at other material. You might notice that for much of the material that I have there, but not all, if it has a date, it's around 2016. That's the last time I was asked to do this lecture for the CDC. Now, I have updated some of the stuff, and we'll tell you about it, but of course, if you go online and you search for these topics, there's usually 10 articles for every article that I've given you on the same topic. So a lot of it is repetitive, a lot of it has been around for a while. Some things have changed, and some things are very jurisdiction specific, should I say. So I will try to touch on that, but again, these are not by any means the only authorities on this topic. They're just a sampling that I gave you. You've got some that are from U.S. sources, some from University of Kent, which will give you a British perspective, which I perhaps may not be as qualified to discuss, which gives us to the brief introduction that I should give you. My name is Dragan Ivetic, as you see up here. I'll make sure it's on the screen. I'm the president of the Association of Defense Counsel practicing before international courts and tribunals, which is the generic name we give to this institution. I am an American trained and licensed attorney from Chicago, Illinois. I've been in practice for, let's say 20 years, more or less. And much of that time has been spent going back and forth between the United States and here, with the caveat that since 2006 I've more or less have worked here full-time, here being whatever this institution was called at that particular time, since we like to keep changing names, acronyms, and signs all the time. But I've been primarily defense counsel, and I've been one of the attorneys on the defense team of General Ratko Mladic, among other cases. I think 6 or 7 cases in total. So I have a lot of knowledge internationally. Today I will be grilling and torturing you, lucky you, for approximately 2 hours on the topic of interview skills and interviewing. Prior to that, I worked at 2 U.S. firms, and I'm also currently working at 2 U.S. firms as well. So I have a little bit of back and forth. And again, we'll have time for questions at the end, so it won't be really grilling, but it's only partly said in jest, because an interview, at least from the perspective of the interviewer, is not just about you introducing yourself to a complete stranger and making yourself stand out from other applicants. But oftentimes we as interviewers like to kind of see how you dance when we grill you with difficult questions, how you respond, and whether you're stumped, and how you are prepared to answer a difficult question. So oftentimes, at least my questions, are very precisely chosen in terms of their order and their content, and sometimes their delivery, to try to sometimes evoke uncertainty, to see how the person reacts, and that helps me make my decision when it comes to hiring practices. Because oftentimes we have so many people and so few positions. But And other people have told me that they also use that same technique, so it's not just me. Like I said, I've read a lot of literature on this, and I've talked to a lot of people on this. So oftentimes, if you feel uncomfortable or nervous, the question might be intended to do that. So when you realize that, then you have to think, okay, I got to stop that. I got to just focus on doing my best and giving my best face forward for the interview. Now, the purpose of an interview. Essentially, it's a meeting between two people. Someone who represents a company, an organization, or a law firm, and you who wants a job. Hopefully they have a job. But you have to realize that they probably have many people applying for that same job or that same group of jobs. And the fact that you made it to the interview means that you passed the initial CV review process, which means everyone that is interviewing is at more or less the same level or comparable level as you in terms of their CVs. So, two things to take away from that. Congratulations, you're on equal footing with everyone that you're interviewing against, in theory. Bad news is, you have to now find something else that's not in your CV, or a better way to present something from your CV to stand out from everyone else. So, on the one hand, it's good. On the other hand, it's extra work you have to do. And again, think of it as a clean, fresh start. Typically, people that are interviewing will have reviewed your CVs. It's still a very good idea to bring a copy of your CV just in case, because it can't hurt. And oftentimes, if they've had lots of people to interview, they might not have your CV at the top of their list. They might not be current with it, so just bring it. Another thing I want to stress, especially when you're dealing with large firms, large organizations, typically the person that is interviewing you at the interview is not the one who makes the decision whether you're hired or not. Their job, because they're usually lower on the totem pole, so their job is to take in the information and make a recommendation or a pitch to their bosses as to, okay, out of these 5 people, this one or these 2 should be hired, these are the reasons why. So they are making a leap of faith in supporting you and recommending you to their bosses or to the hiring committee or whoever has the decision-making authority. So in essence, your job is to try to convince that person who's a stranger to make that leap of faith for you. And truth be told, the decision is usually made long before the conclusion of the interview. So it's very hard to change the initial perception of someone. You should prepare for an interview as if you're preparing for anything else in your life that was important, whether it was a master's or a final paper or something like that. Interviews are very important. Now, the interview allows the employer or prospective employer to get a good look at you and see if you would fit in the firm structure. It's an opportunity for them to get information, but it's also an opportunity for you to get information. It's not a one-way street. So you find out more about the firm, and if you ask intelligent questions, that will always help, because you want to find out about the firm and make sure that you're making a choice if you are lucky enough to be accepted by several firms to pick the right firm that you'll be comfortable at, where you will fit in, and where you'll be happy doing the work that they're doing, not find out, oh my gosh, this is exactly not what I want to be doing after you've made the decision. One thing that I cannot stress enough, and we'll get to it multiple times in this presentation, do not think you can get away with faking anything in an interview. Even if it seems like you've gotten away with it, it could come back to hurt you later on. And try to be yourself rather than to be what you think the interviewer wants you to be. Because if you're pretending, the prospective employer, the interviewer, is going to have a different view of you, and then if you are hired, then it's going to be like, wait a minute, this is not the same person we hired. And likewise, you'll be perhaps working somewhere where you would not have chosen to work otherwise. And again, nothing really comes of trying to cheat the interview process, as you will see. Now, since you don't have to pretend to be someone you aren't, that should also lower the level of stress that you have at an interview. Because you just be yourself. Be truthful, be yourself, the more comfortable you can be, the more successful you'll be in an interview, whether it's for legal position or any type of position. So just try to be yourself, put yourself in the best light possible. Don't overextend, don't overdo things, we'll get to that later. And, be ready to roll with any questions that come up, especially difficult questions. And the key is just not to shut down. Have an answer, or if you need more time, ask, make sure you understand the question so that you're answering the question that's being asked. And so this all comes from being prepared. Working ahead of time, doing research, find articles like the ones I've given you. There's hundreds more. Hard work and practice. Why do I say practice? Because if you practice, the chances are you'll have a much better interview. You'll not have any rough patches, and it'll be a much more relaxed experience. Now, let's see if this works. Yes, it does. In your packets, you have a handout that should look something like this at the top. I don't know what order they're in, but I'll give you a chance to flip through before you find these common interview questions. But it should come as no surprise to you that typically there's many of these websites that have interview questions that are commonly used in interviews. Some are prepared statistically, some are prepared based upon the interviewers themselves submitting these questions, and they're good to look at because, believe it or not, they're actually questions that are used. Now, I actually, when I first did this presentation back many years ago, I had a set of questions that I used for my interviews, that I created, that I thought were kind of unique. Then I found this list and I found, wow, half my questions are on this list, so I didn't really come up with anything unique, but I didn't know it. So the point is, you should do the research to find the questions that you might be confronted with. And again, these lists are out there, so interviewers know about them, and so they might put a little tweak on a particular question to make it novel, to, I guess, counteract that you might be prepared for these. So we won't go through all of them, but for instance, if you look at number 2 on the list, name your 3 greatest strengths. Now, that is kind of an easy one, and it gives you a chance to kind of expand upon what you believe your strengths are. I never give people that opportunity. I like to tweak it and say, okay, name your 3 greatest strengths, but use only 1 word each. What 3 words would you use to describe your strengths? Be ready for something like that, where you have to kind of shorten what you would normally say and present it in a quick manner. And I didn't get it from the list. This is one I've been using for a long time, but it's on the list. Now, I've had at least 2. I have a seat anywhere where there's a handout. The first handout is the Code of Conduct for Sexual Harassment that has not yet been instituted here fully, but out of abundance of caution, everyone should follow it and know it. The handouts are for you, and we're right now looking at the handout that says Common Interview Questions, and we're looking at number 2. Now, this is the number 2 on this list, meaning it's the second most often used question in an interview. Believe it or not, I've had at least 3 people that I've interviewed say, oh wow, that's a novel question I wasn't expecting during an interview. And yet here it is on the list as being a common question. Word of advice, it's number 2 on my list down here. Never admit to being surprised by a question. You should always give the air of being prepared for any question. So even if you are surprised by a question, don't let it show, and try to come up with a coherent answer, or as close as you can to a coherent answer, because you don't want to say, oh, I really don't know. Especially if someone goes, it's number 2 on the list. So don't bet against yourself. Now, what I would suggest is, if you can find a list, this one has, I forget how many, like 30 or 40 common questions. take a number of them and kind of prepare answers, how you would answer them, and practice them. Commit them to memory so that they come off your tongue almost like you're talking normally. Now, when I say practice, I mean it. It's one thing to practice inside your head with your inner voice. It's another thing to speak out loud. Now, I always practice whenever I'm doing a presentation, whenever I'm doing an appeals argument, whenever I'm doing closing arguments. And that means that I speak out loud, I time myself, I talk in front of a mirror, and I try to get rid of any nervous twitches, any mispronunciations, any stumbling over words, and I try to simplify my answer. I strongly suggest you do that as well, because it will make the nerves in an interview process are going to be there. But if you already have kind of like a basic outline of answers to the most common questions, you'll be less nervous and more able to answer the questions. Now, let's see. Oh, learn how to breathe. Don't talk too fast. You don't want to be passing out. You don't want to be panting for breath in an interview. You don't want to be sweating. So, that's another good thing about practicing these answers. You kind of learn the pace to talk at, the tone to talk at. And if you see something you don't like, oh my God, my eye's twitching, you can work on that so that, the interviewer doesn't see that version of you. Now, the next one on the list, I believe it's number 3 now, is what is your greatest weakness? Well, that's easy if you only have to prepare for one, and we'll see in a video that talks about how to prepare for one. But again, I rarely only ask for one. I usually say, if given 3 words or less, describe your 3 greatest weaknesses or faults. And that puts you on the spot. But again, most interviewers are going to do that because they want to put you on the spot. And you don't get a chance to explain yourself unless you earn it. So if you give 3, very quickly and confidently 3 solid weaknesses, I will give you a chance to explain yourself. Most interviewers will. If you start trying to explain, you're already violating the instruction that I gave you, showing you don't listen and you're trying to get around the rules that I've laid forward. So you have to kind of treat the interviewer as the judge, as it were. They set the rules, and you have to follow the rules and hope that they give you a chance to explain yourself. They usually will. Now, most often when the way people can fail is if they actually don't have an answer for that. I mean, we have to be cognizant of the fact that all of us have weaknesses. We usually know what they are, whether we want to admit them or not. So have something prepared. It doesn't have to be major. We have a video later that will talk about that, but there's nothing worse than sitting there and having 3 minutes of awkward silence for someone to come up with just 3 words that I was going to give them 3 minutes to explain anyway, and they've now used up to 3 minutes just coming up with the words. So be fast and certain with your answers, and be confident. And again, it's typically a test. Now, I said that relax, there's not going to be any tests. There actually is a test. So this is our first exercise. Those of you who have pens and paper, those of you who don't, memorize, or I can lend at least one pen that I have here. Someone needs a pen? There you go. Perfect. There was one pen needed. Anywhere on the back of the handout, in your notebooks, I want you to do the following, and pay very close attention. In your head, in your mind, all of us have a question that we say, oh my God, I don't want to be asked this because I don't know how to answer this. It's a question you fear, and it's a question that every time you're asked, you go, I wish they'd not asked me that. I want you to write that down for yourselves, that question that you never want to be asked. Write it down. Don't tell it to me, I don't care what it is, but write it down, remember it, and then look up when you're ready to go on. and relax. I usually don't ask this question because I don't know it. This is something only you know. But you'll see why I'm doing it this way in a moment. Okay, I think everyone is, oh, one more. Okay, so now what you've written down on your various papers or committed to memory, that's your worst case scenario. That's the question that you don't have an answer to. So, how do you prepare for an interview and, like, I think remove 99% of your nerves? Prepare an answer for that between now and your next interview. Because then you'll be ready for the question that you don't have an answer for. And therefore you should feel a lot more confident, a lot more at ease, and heaven forbid someone asks that question, you've got an answer. So that's why I do this way, and trust me, it works. So, now, again, you don't have to do it today, think about it, and develop an answer for that question. And again, if you have others that you are afraid of, do the same thing for those as well. So that's how you personalize your approach to interviews, by preparing for what you don't want to be asked, and then everything else will seem easier. Okay? See, so it was an easy test. Now, getting back to the question of what is your biggest weakness. Just as I said it's bad to sit there and not have an answer, it's also very bad to spend a lot of time talking about and trying to explain away your weakness. I once had an interviewee, who was rather good on paper. Their CV was pretty good. And, let's put it this way. Usually during the first 3 to 4 minutes of the interview, I've already made my decision. And then the rest of the time, I'm just testing things to see whether I change it in a different way. And I was about 75% certain I was going to hire this individual until we got to this question, which was probably by that point in time number 5 on my list. And he kept talking for 15 minutes about his weaknesses. Wouldn't shut up. I said, in 3 words or less. So he's violating my instruction to him, showing he doesn't take assignments very well. I stopped listening. He's boring me. I'm like, why would anyone be spending more time talking about their weaknesses than their strengths? But I've seen it happen. I don't know why. So be conscious of that and cut yourself off because you don't want to overemphasize weaknesses, because then you have to somehow explain them away. And again, I did not hire that person, and it's a small world, especially in international law. So I also might have suggested to other teams that they might skip that CV, and to my knowledge, that person was not hired. Word of mouth goes a long way in a small world like international law. So we come to our first video, and I apologize because you all work here in this building, right? Okay, so you know how our technology is fantastic. So the PowerPoint videos don't work. I have to do them this way. So.
Hi everyone, I'm Amy Bateman from Career Cake TV. I did a video a couple of months ago with the guys at Firebrand Talent Search, and we had some fantastic feedback, so thank you. Now I've spoken to the team and we've decided to do another video to help you at interview. And this time I'm going to be looking at the question, what's your biggest weakness? So we've all heard those textbook answers that tell you to pick a weakness that is also a strength. So something like, I'm a complete workaholic, my family get really frustrated with me because when I get a job I throw myself into work. Or your weakness is, I'm a perfectionist. I want everything around me to be perfect, and I get slightly frustrated when other people don't want it to be as perfect. Now the problem is that nobody is that incredible that their weakness makes them more incredible. And if you pick a weakness that is so obviously a strength in a working environment, then people are going to see straight through that. So what I would really like, remember, the interviewer has also been a job seeker and been on an interview and has probably read the exact same articles as you and the same textbook answers. So yeah, pick something that you genuinely struggle with. Nothing too horrendous, however, that nobody would hire you. We all know what not to say. I'm sure, I hope. No, I'm sure. So pick something genuine. So maybe it's that you struggle in conflict situations. Maybe you struggle with your confidence levels amongst your peers. So my weakness used to be public speaking to large groups of people. And in my job, that was a massive weakness. However, obviously, with what I do now, I've overcome that completely. But yeah, something I've really struggled with. So I want you to focus on 4 steps, okay? The first step being setting the tone by saying, in the past I've struggled slightly with. So what you're saying to the interviewer is that in the past, this weakness is already kind of behind us. I've struggled slightly with, so this is not a big deal, with da-da-da. However, I'm really strong at da-da-da. So whatever it is, you're obviously counteracting the weakness with a fabulous strength. Then give an example of what you've been doing to overcome that weakness. Give exact examples if you can. Try and use the past tense as much as possible, because again, we want to make the interviewer feel like we're dealing with this, we've got this under control. And then you finish with that really happy story. So give an example, tell a story of something really positive where you overcame that weakness. Okay, you can say you're still working on it if you want to. That's cool. So if you're going to pick the public speaking weakness, you could say, in the past, I've struggled slightly with speaking to large groups of people. However, I'm really strong at speaking to smaller groups of people. I'm really good at building rapport with people one-on-one. What I've done to overcome that is, you might say that you spent time with colleagues that are really good at it, you practiced it, you took some coaching, you took a course, and then give an example, a happy story. Recently, in fact, I did a presentation to a team that worked in another office of ours, to a large group of people. The messages were clear, I felt confident, feedback from management was that they were really, really pleased. So yeah, I've come a long way. I'm still working on it, but I've come a long way. So that's how you answer that. In the past, I've struggled slightly with, however, I'm really good at. This is what I'm doing to overcome it, and here's my happy story. All right? Now, honesty will get you so far in an interview. We don't want to say anything, obviously, too horrendous. We've covered that, but yeah, certainly honesty will get you a long way.
Okay, so, great advice. Of course, you will notice if you get stuck with someone like me who doesn't give you a chance to say in the past, but says, give me 3 words, you have to deviate from that and try to see if they allow you to go with the route that she recommends. But honestly, very few interviewers will be as nasty as I am, I think, in interviews. So you usually will be able to give the format that she suggests. But again, if the interviewer tries to cut you off and direct you in a different way, follow the interviewer. Don't be wedded to the formula that she gives, because again, the interviewer is the boss. So try to somehow direct your answer in the same direction, but yet comply with whatever instruction the interviewer has given you. Oh, no, I forgot. Second test, I forgot about this one. Okay, for this one I need a volunteer who is brave to face us. And again, I don't think I've interviewed anyone here, so everyone's eligible. This is, you're going to be exposed to my most difficult and most important question that I used to ask in interviews, which was the last chance to either be hired or not. So, who wants to volunteer to try to answer that question? Anyone? Come on, someone. It's not that difficult. Don't you want to be hired? That's the whole point of this lecture, isn't it? So I pick someone at random?
I can do it.
You'll do it? Okay. So, remember, this is my most difficult question. You probably won't find it on any of these websites and everything, but it's very important. So, what is your favorite color? Why is it your favorite color? And within 1 minute, convince me that it should become my favorite color.
Good question. My favourite colour is turquoise, and it's because it reminds me of the ocean, and that's somewhere where I feel very calm and very restored. And I think it should be your favourite colour because it would, brighten your day. It would also perhaps remind you of a happy place, and I hope you can enjoy it as much as I do.
Perfect. Now, were you expecting that question?
No.
Did you pre-prepare that answer?
No.
See, but that's what I like to do, because that shows that someone is able to think on their feet and not be shocked. And there is no wrong answer, by the way, to that question.
Mm-hmm.
Any color you pick, I don't care. If you happen to pick my favorite color, that's great. But it does that. I don't choose based upon the answer. I choose based upon the reaction. And it's not always what I base my decision upon. It's just a little test to see whether you're ready. And various interviewers will always have something like that is meant to kind of surprise you, shock you, because again, who would know this unless you took my course? Which is why I stopped to change that question, and therefore no longer surprise people with that question, because it's already out there. But there you go. See how easy it can be. So don't be afraid of volunteering. Now, okay, so we've talked about that. Now, getting back to the first handout, which is still on the screen, these are primarily from the American perspective, and they're based upon what are proper questions and what are improper questions in the U.S. system. But now, of course, you'll be applying for international jobs, I suspect. So, has anyone here applied using a French or Swiss style CV? Okay. How many here are from the U.S.? At least one? Okay. So certain things that we are not allowed to ask for in the U.S., marital status, age, whether you have children or not, are mandatory on a French or Swiss CV, including a photograph. So you have to research these things and find out. And I happen to know for a Swiss CV, you're supposed to start off with 3 phrases praising yourself, almost like a politician's ad, slogans or mottos, which is very hard for someone to prepare. I've helped people prepare these, and it's very hard to not make it sound kind of fake or corny, but it's just considered part of the way that they do it. And so if you are applying somewhere, kind of research. As I mentioned, one of the handouts is from the University of Kent and is specific to UK, or whatever it's going to be called after Brexit, their scenario, and so that will help you in terms of that. I will tell you a story that, again, now with this UN sexual harassment guide, I might have a different answer to it, but rumor has it that a certain British barrister, one of the questions that they always like to ask was, do you like sex? Which is not a proper question to ask under the American system. I would hazard to say under the UN guidelines would not be a proper question to ask. And if you are asked that question, you may want to bring it to someone's attention. But I was told, and I don't know whether he really asked that or not, but I was told that his follow-up was always, because my legal assistant always likes to talk about what she did over the weekend and it'll bore you, so I'm just kind of preparing you for the team. Now, I don't know what the purpose of that question is. Again, based upon the guidelines, I would not ask that, nor would I expect someone to ask that. But I've heard it's been used. And I withhold judgment on it, apart from saying they were British. Yes?
Do we have to answer this kind of inappropriate questions?
I think you'd be justified in saying, I'd rather not answer such a question because that's not pertinent to the position I'm applying for. And in fact, now you have this UN guideline. So if you're applying for a UN job, you can say, I believe that might be a violation of UN guidelines such and such, and be smarter than the interviewer, which is another reason why I gave you that guideline. So I can try to help. Now, next video, right? Gotta do this again. This is the tell me about yourself, the perfect answer, at least what this guy believes is the perfect answer.
Don Georgievich here, author of the Complete Interview Answer Guide. And today, I'm going to answer the question for you, tell me about yourself, just like I do inside the Complete Interview Answer Guide. I mean, where to start? What do they want to know? I mean, should you start in high school, college, first grade? I mean, it's one of the most frequently asked questions in the interview. I mean, the way you answer this question is going to set the tone for the rest of the interview. I mean, this can be a challenging question to answer if you're not prepared for it. But it's really asked as an icebreaker. Now, like I said, this is an open-ended question, but really what the interviewer wants to hear about is your recent work experience. I mean, why don't they just ask, about your recent work experience? Because they want to see where you're going to go with an open-ended question. I mean, your answer tells them a lot. It tells them where your mind is. If you start telling them, when they ask this question, that you're a Cleveland Browns fan, well, then you're way off base with what they want to hear, and you've just made your first interview mistake. Now, what do you want the interviewer to know about you when you leave? Do you want them to know about your work experience or your personal interests? I'm confident your hiring decision is going to be based on your work experience. Save your personal interests for the water cooler after you get the job. Now, I'm going to tell you the wrong way to answer this question. Don't throw it back in their lap and say, "What would you like to know?" That answer has really been floating around for a while, and all it really does is just kind of shove that question right back at the interviewer in an insulting way, and then they just have to re-ask the question, and they're just not going to appreciate that. A better way to answer that would be to say, what part of my work experience would you like me to talk about? And I say it this way because, now the interviewer, they can reply with a simple, straightforward answer. Some interviewers want you to start from your first job, they had 30 years ago, and others just want to hear about what you've been doing recently. If the interviewer would like you to start from the first job, assuming it's been several years since you had the job, then lightly touch on the jobs that you no longer hold, but expand on your current or most recent jobs, experience and accomplishments, the ones that are more relevant to the job that you're applying for. Focus your answer and talk about your accomplishments from your current or most recent job and lightly touch on your daily duties. These are the things an interviewer really wants to hear. Because if he thinks you were successful at your past job, then you'll be successful at this job. Even if you don't feel that you accomplished anything, look deep and think of something you did that helped the company. Or better yet, describe an accomplishment that you contributed to the company. Just make sure it's in the same line of work. Don't take credit for boosting sales, if your job was to fix computers. It's just totally unrelated. Briefly talk about your current employer.
Okay. Simple, easy to follow advice. Now I want to move to another topic. Switch here. Doesn't really matter, but anyhow. Appearance and demeanor during an interview. And now I'm not only talking about how to dress and present yourself, I'm also talking about how you answer questions. Try to maintain eye contact. Oftentimes if you have multiple people interviewing you, try to at least hold the eye contact of each of the persons for a certain length of time when you're answering a question. That builds rapport, that builds familiarity, and that makes a difference. We do the same thing with judges. We're taught the same thing with judges. When you're making an argument, make eye contact with them, kind of build a bond with them. So, again, eye contact is important. Posture is very important. Let me see if I have that coming up later. I probably do. I had one interviewee who kept spinning around in his chair and was looking all over the place except at me. I could have walked out of the room. They probably would not have noticed that I had left the room. Guess what? They were not hired. It's simple things, but if you're nervously fidgeting around, then that distracts from the interviewer listening to what you're saying. And I'm sure I have it later on, so we'll save that for later. There's another, yeah, I do. So I have another tidbit for you, but first, I thought we'd go through this one video, which I kept it there. Whoops, not that one. That shows a couple of examples, and we'll talk about them, because these are examples of what are supposedly good versus bad answers in an interview by the University of Rhode Island. Okay, let's get this.
Hi, my name is Allie. I'm a junior at URI and I'm an early childhood major. I'm from Bridgewater, Massachusetts, and I was a camp counselor for the past 5 years. I also participated in the program Jumpstart at URI. It was a lot of fun. I really worked well with kids, and after completing the program, I realized I'd make a really good teacher.
Okay, so we've watched this girl. Can everyone see problems with it? Yeah, the fidgeting with the pencil, playing with her hair, and sort of the I don't want to say not serious, but the kind of ultra casual method of talking and facial expressions, which will again detract from whatever she is saying. Now, to show you kind of how drastically different it is, they have the same girl doing it the right way, or what they call the good way.
Hi, my name is Allison Sutherland, and after recently being accepted into the School of Education at the University of Rhode Island, I'm now one step closer to achieving my goal of becoming a kindergarten teacher. Participating in the AmeriCorps program Jumpstart at URI, I was able to develop my leadership abilities and saw firsthand how important the learning process is in a young child's life. I'm a focused student that maintains a high GPA. I'm very involved on campus. I was a civic engagement leader where I had the opportunity to lead the freshmen in volunteer projects all around the community. I recently started my practicums in the classrooms and received positive feedback from each experience. Overall, I learn fast, work hard, and am ready for any challenge.
Okay, what do you guys think? Better?
She was still kind of fidgeting.
Exactly.
Insincere.
They say it's good. I say it's better, not good. Number one, she's talking too fast.
Yeah, I agree.
I'm expecting her to pass out at any moment. She's also kind of giving us a lot of information that appears to be kind of a robotic script that they have learned. Not talking normally, not being yourself. So again, they call this good. I don't think it's good. I think it's better, but it still could use some improvement. So again, when you're out there researching these things, just because someone says this is the perfect answer or a good answer, don't take their word for it. Watch a couple of the videos or read a couple more articles. Let's look at, I think, one more or two more.
My name is Arjun Grija. I'm at the College of Pharmacy at URI, which is the University of Rhode Island. I'm also at their honors program. I volunteered at my local hospital last summer, and I work at CVS, hoping to get experience. So I hope I can join your team.
You can have beverages, but you shouldn't be playing with the beverages. You shouldn't be holding the beverages. You should have them off to one side. This pharmacy student might have taken too many pharmaceuticals before this interview because he's very kind of, lulling himself and the interviewer to sleep. And you'll notice his attire is very, very casual. Again, this is the same student or interviewee.
Hi, my name is Arjun Grija, and since entering the College of Pharmacy at the University of Rhode Island, I'm on my way to becoming a licensed pharmacist. As a driven student, I challenged myself to join URI's honor program, and through the program, I was able to volunteer for the Habitat for Humanity in Alabama. At the site, I was able to see how easy it was to positively impact the lives of others, and that's what I hope to accomplish as a future pharmacist. I also volunteered at my local hospital this past summer to develop my communication skills and to get more familiar with the medical environment. Lastly, I'm a current student intern at CVS Pharmacy, and I see on a daily basis how important dedication and teamwork are to provide excellent service to the patient. I believe through my experience and my education, I'll be able to succeed at any position.
Apparently in this school they like scripts. Because again, I think it's better, but it's a script. And this is why I tell you, when you prepare answers to these common questions, practice them so that you shorten them, so that you become more familiarized talking with them, so that you don't sound like you're just sitting there reading memorized script. Because, yeah, go ahead.
So what this would show to the interviewer then?
What's that?
So what this would show to the interviewer if you were speaking like a robot and you just have the script? What could they think possibly?
it could be negative or positive. It all depends on what they're looking for. You know, are the answers correct? Yes. Are the answers something that the person learned from their friend or that they actually know? You know, obviously, if you speak in a more comfortable manner, comfortable with the language, I'm going to believe that it's coming from you, not from some textbook that you just memorized. Because let's face it, anyone can memorize text. I can memorize medical text and I can sound like a doctor and not be a doctor. You know, so just memorizing things is not convincing someone that you actually know what you're talking about. And now, I guess to give Rhode Island one more chance, we have a third candidate.
My name is Steph Saunders. I'm a junior communications major at URI. I'm very interested in getting experience in marketing, and I play soccer. So I'm good with people on a team.
Don't ever chew gum in an interview. Do not chew your pen. Do not chew your arm off unless you have to, like, if you're stuck, you have to get out of there as a fire. Do not chew anything. Be conscious of what's on your head. I actually had an interview where at the end of the interview, the person went, "Oh my God, I still have my sunglasses on my head." And in that case, everything else they did overcame that fact that I still hired them. But, you know, that's a big no-no. And again, very lackadaisical, and, you know, the fact that she had to think about what her major was, not quite the best presentation. Again, now we're going to see whether Rhode Island actually does do a robotic script or whether you can do better.
My name is Steph Saunders. I'm a junior communications major with a minor in business administration. I've been on the dean's list every semester for the past 3 years, and I've been very involved on campus. I'm a part of the student senate, and I'm also a member of the women's soccer team. This last semester, I was able to gain real valuable work experience by interning in the alumni relations group, where I was able to work on event planning and different marketing tasks. I really feel like my internship, coupled with my experience on the soccer team, would make me a real valuable asset to your team.
So notice how there's eye contact. It flows a little bit better, and the hand gestures correlate to the spoken word, which helps to emphasize what she's saying. So she, I think, is a little bit better, but still not necessarily perfect. I would hope that when you guys do the interviews, you'll be even better than this, but much better than her first interview. So we've done that. Now, we have many guides, and some of the handouts talk about how to dress for an interview. Now, and again, they're dated. Fashion does change. I do have 2 websites at the end of the PowerPoint that are dated as of yesterday. What are the most current fashion etiquette things for interviews, so you can have that information. I don't know what's correct, but there's one thing that is important, and that is you don't want the wardrobe to make the impression for you. So don't wear anything too flashy. This is one area where you do want to try to blend in with everyone else, unfortunately, because again, especially if it's a law position, the practice of law is rather conservative in the original meaning of that sense, not the political meaning of that word. And so, again, we have the, actually, go back to this one. There we go. No, off the record. Yeah, off the record. This is a handout that you have, and it's actual tips from interviewers that are practitioners. And if you go to page 2 of that handout, near the middle, and I'll read it for you, and it talks about first impressions. Being late is the kiss of death. Assume that the interview is going to begin 30 minutes before the actual time, and grab a cup of coffee if you arrive early. Now, I've just read that. That's what one website says. I've read other websites that say, do not show up too early, because they've usually slotted you in for a specific time, and you don't want to be catching them off guard or wasting their time. So arrive early enough so you can see when they're ready for you, but don't be sitting at the door, you know, peeking in an hour early, okay? So again, this has great advice, but not all the advice. I'm adding to it, annotating a few. Going on. Be polite and courteous to support staff, such as secretaries, front desk receptionists, etc. They often have the ear of the decision makers and will not hesitate to provide informal feedback on you, especially if you're not respectful. Why? Because typically you're going to be working with that person. So they're actually not there just to guide you to the room of the interview. They're the one to decide, do I want to work with this person? Do I want to give, again, a leap of faith to my boss to say, yeah, I have a good feeling or a good vibe about this person. So that's important to know. Turn off your cell phones, or don't bring them with you, whichever. Get a haircut. And then this one says, for men, wear a dark suit, a white, blue shirt, and red-blue tie. Take off that strange-looking high school ring. No one will appreciate your unique fashion sense. Don't give people something weird to remember you by 2 months later when they're trying to remember who you are and whether you deserve an offer. Do not look at your watch like you want to get out of there as fast as you can. Make eye contact. The more you're relaxed and at ease, the more the interview will be relaxed and ease. If your hands tend to get sweaty, keep a handkerchief in your pocket. There's nothing worse than clam hands. For both men and women, a firm handshake and winning smile is important. And this author says, I've written people off immediately after a limp handshake. That's a little bit rough. Now, this is where we get into two different areas. One is, oftentimes we're taught when we're dealing with witnesses, police and lawyers are taught this, I should say, to sort of mimic sometimes the movements or gestures or postures of the person asking you questions. That helps to build a rapport. But be careful, because if someone is experienced, like myself, they're going to purposely take a position like this and ask you questions like this, and you should not be answering questions like this. So don't get lulled into doing everything that the interviewer is asking you to do. Then we have someone asked about this, the Berkeley Law handout on effective interviewing. That's because Berkeley Law is one of the more peculiar or stricter standards in the U.S. And here what I want to highlight is on page 3 at the bottom. But again, in your free time, feel free to read this in full. I just want to highlight a few things because I don't want to keep you here all day. So on page 3 at the bottom, again, dress like a lawyer. And it tells you, again, what type of colors, etc., etc., etc. Perfumes, aftershaves, lotion, and cologne should be used sparingly, if at all. If you are a smoker, do not smoke prior to the interview. Too much jewelry, particularly dangling earrings, is distracting. Avoid overdoing the makeup. Remember that employers will see you from the back as well as from the front, so check your appearance from both perspectives. And again, demeanor. And, if you turn the page, the most important thing, avoid crossing your arms across your chest, which is considered a defensive posture, so nothing like this. And before you depart, thank your interviewer, express your enjoyment of your meeting, and if possible, get the interviewer's business card so you can follow up with an email. These are all great things. Now, again, I'm going to add something that usually is not found in these, again, even in the updated fashion manual of what you should wear for both men and women. I like to say what I tell to my witnesses. Wear something that you're comfortable in. Make sure it's not something that you're wearing for the first time that you haven't gotten used to. Make sure it's not something that's that fits awkwardly so that you've got an itch or something that's discomforting, because that discomfort will come out as nervousness, and it won't even be related to the questions. It'll just be your personal discomfort with your outfit. And again, make sure you've worn shoes that you've worn before, because you don't want blisters, you don't want to be stumbling. This goes for guys and girls. I always make sure that shoes I pick are shoes that fit from their first go, because otherwise, you're any discomfort or stumbling as you're getting up is going to be perhaps negatively interpreted. And that's not just according to me, it's according to the experts on body language, which is our next video.
So often we make business contacts by telephone,
This
by
is Forbes
email,
magazine.
through social media. It may be months or even years before we meet. When we do, we've made a good first impression, but then our body language kicks in. Does it help us or hurt us? Christine Yonke's going to talk about that with us.
I'm looking forward to meeting Deborah for the first time in person. And here are the things that I'll be looking for in terms of how I draw or form that initial impression. Number one, eye contact. Does she look at me directly? Two, what is the quality of her voice? Does it sound inviting? No doubt we'll shake hands, so I'll be feeling for the firmness of her handshake. And then finally, what does she say? What is her opening message to me?
Second time they talk about the firmness of the handshake. Again, I don't see that as a big deal, but other people do, so.
Can't wait to meet Deborah.
Well, I'm so glad that we could do this. I'd like to talk a little bit about the things that people do to help their case or hurt their case when they finally meet someone after making that connection by email, by phone, through social media. And when you and I spoke on the telephone, you mentioned that the voice is the one thing that carries over both from the phone to person. So let's start with that, and how does what people do with their voices help them or hurt them?
If there's any element of how we present ourselves that's overlooked by most people, it is the quality of your voice. But the starting point is knowing how you sound. Does your voice project confidence? Is the tone warm? Does it have resonance? Or on the other hand, could your voice etch glass? A common mistake, and it's not even so much a mistake, but it's more of just a function of nerves. If you are a junior person and maybe interviewing for a first job, it's not unexpected that you might speak more quickly. Your pace may be too quick, but to know that if you lower the tone of your voice a little bit, that literally adds more meaning to your words. A lower tone sounds more substantive, and what you're talking about sounds more important. So when you meet someone for the first time, I think the things that are really important are number one, eye contact. So I was looking to see, would you look me in the eye? And you did, and that was a very positive signal. When you're talking about something that's really important to you, don't look away mid-sentence, but hold your eye contact until the end of the sentence or the end of the thought.
What if we need a little break to look down at some point? When can we do that?
Yeah, you do get to blink. Not blinking is a little zombie-like. That'll look a little odd to the person that you're talking to. So absolutely, you want good steady eye contact. What you don't want to do is the eyes up towards the ceiling, as if the answers are hidden there. Shifty eyes back and forth, darting, which makes you look very nervous. Or constant up and down. So good steady eye contact, you need to break away a little bit, and when you want to take a real pause, go ahead and look down in a substantive way.
How about our hands? The first thing we did was to shake hands.
You're sending a signal with that handshake, and there's nothing worse than someone who grabs a hold of your hand and hangs on too long and pumps and pumps and pumps. Or I think second worse, and I think women are a little bit more guilty of that, the little finger clasp.
Like a fish.
Just like, or a cold fish at the worst, right? Not good.
And posture? What's the difference, and what should we be doing?
Well, you want to have good posture just like your mother always told you to. The trick is to drop your shoulders back, and that will give you a nice presence. And then notice how I'm tilting forward from the waist a little bit. This is a very interactive posture. I'm signaling to you that I'm engaged. I'm interested in what you have to say, and again, it's conversational.
There's so much good information here. What's the one thing you would like people to take away from all of this?
Good steady eye contact and good posture, and you'll create a great first impression.
Okay,
I have a question.
go ahead.
I've been told by professors and some instructors that for girls, if you have a lower, deeper voice, you're taken more seriously as to having the nervous high-pitched. Like if that really is a thing.
Sadly, it might be. For me personally, it's not, because I realize people have different voices. I personally don't like the sound of my own voice when I hear it back recorded. I think it's too kind of, I think it's a common thing that you don't like your own voice because it sounds too high pitched. But so maybe there is sort of a prejudice to that, but there shouldn't be. If you're relaxed and if you know what you're talking about, it shouldn't. But of course, as you heard, she says, you know, talk with a lower voice. But again, I always say you are more comfortable when you are yourself than when you are pretending to be someone you're not. It sounds fake. So I would say stick with your normal level of voice as much as possible, except that when you are explaining something important, do speak slower, because as you speak slower, you will automatically speak lower, I think, and that should help that. Now, one thing that they brought up, and this is a tip I usually don't give, but I will give now because they mentioned it, about not to like look all around and have your eyes darting around, etc. You know, eventually you might want to look away to try to remember and think about something. When I asked you about your favorite color, your eyes went in a particular direction. Do you know which way?
That way?
No,
No?
to the right.
Okay.
To the right. Now, why is that important? If I remember, if you're interviewing with a well-trained lawyer, that's when someone is looking for a true memory as opposed to a false memory.
Oh, right, first left? Is that a thing?
Yeah, that's the
Okay.
thing. Yeah, psychologists have done studies on that. So, if you do have to look in a particular direction to buy yourself some time to come up with an answer, look to the right with your eyes. You're like this. Shouldn't probably tell you that, but I'm here to help you. So that is something they didn't cover, and I've never covered before, and I only do because one of my managing partner did a CLE on that not too long ago, so I have the research to back it up now. I always thought it was like that, but so that's that. Next we go to in today's world we now have this new thing called Skype. Well, it's not that new anymore. But that creates a whole slew of different problems when you're doing an interview via Skype. Eye contact is difficult because you want to look at the screen instead of the camera, which is usually higher than the screen. I think you should, you have a handout that I have not used in previous years from Microsoft that gives you some very specific advice that you should follow. I think it's about 2 or 3 pages long. And it's very good to follow that to make sure that you can make the most of your experience when you're doing a Skype interview. I would always also say, and I think it might be on there, I'm not sure, your Skype name is important. So if you've got something from college, it's like frat boy or hot dog 1999, change it or get a new account. I mean, it's simple enough. Oddly enough, mine still says Drake Haig, but I'm not interviewing for jobs, am I? Just make it be something that's more professional. And as luck would have, we do have tips from, I forget where this one's from.
Are you ready for your next Skype interview? The Center for Career Development is a vital resource to help you remain confident and comfortable behind the camera. In this short video, I'm going to touch upon 3 important factors: preparation, conduct, and follow-up, all of which will help you remain professional during your Skype interview. Let's get started. So let's start with number 1, preparation. When you're preparing for your Skype or FaceTime interview, location is key. So you want a location similar to this one, whether it's a bedroom, a meeting room, a quiet place in your house, or even a space on campus. As you can see, I don't have anything distracting behind me. A solid wall without any windows or any sort of wall art that will take away the eye of the employer is really important. One important factor that people forget about is lighting. You want to make sure that the lighting in the room is either above you or in front of you. If you have lighting behind you, it will actually cast a shadow on the computer screen, and the employer may not be able to recognize your face. After your location is settled, you want to try out technology. So if you haven't used Skype or FaceTime in a while, it's important to log on and check out what any updates are available for that software. You can also do a dry run with either your family, friends, or the Center for Career Development. This will let you know whether you have any sound or video delays and how to fix them. You also want to make sure you have a professional Skype name and photo. So if you haven't used Skype in a while, make sure you log on and use your best judgment as to what Skype name is appropriate for you. My tip to you is to use the first letter of your first name and then your full last name. That way the employer won't be confused whether they're calling you or you're calling them. two elements are in place, you also want to make sure that all your background apps on either your iPad, your phone, or your laptop are disabled. Now that we have location and technology covered, let's talk about materials. In a Skype or FaceTime interview, it's important to hold eye contact throughout the time that you're conversing with the employer. If for some reason you do need a cheat sheet, make sure it's to the left or right of the computer screen, and quickly glance down to it if you forget or need something to bring up during the interview. My tip to you is create some post-it notes and post them along the edge of your laptop screen. That way you can easily look left or right of the computer screen very quickly and then go right back to the camera. Your last step in the preparation process is your dress. So even though you're not meeting with the employer face-to-face or in person, it is important that you're dressed professionally. My tip to you is keep all the colors solid. So either a dark black, blue, or gray will look really well on camera. Overall, you want to make sure that the clothing that you're wearing isn't distracting. So of course, no hats or hoodies. For females, my tip to you is to stay away from either dark nail polish or distracting jewelry. So now that we are prepared for the interview, let's move into factor number 2, which is conduct. Conduct is your behavior during the interview process. During the interview, you want to consistently hold eye contact with the camera at all times. I previously mentioned this earlier when we talked about cheat sheets. Sometimes we don't realize during an interview that we look left, right, up, and down. Though this may not be distracting for us, this can be distracting for the person on the other end of the screen. If for some reason you're kind of getting distracted by the image of yourself in the bottom right or bottom left of the software that you're using, just cover it up with a post-it note. That way your intention is clear and looking straight at the camera lens. So once your focus is on the camera, you want to also keep in mind your body language. So if you're like me, you may like to talk with your hands a lot. My tip for you, and a tip that I use a lot, is just essentially folding my hands and keeping them in my lap. If I ever feel the need to start moving my hands or moving my body, I may clench my fists a little bit tighter and keep them in my lap. Once those hands start to free flow, my tip again to you is just to keep them out of sight. So instead of talking up here with your hands, keep them below the table. Although there may be some movement in your shoulders, your hands will be below the side of the camera and the employer won't get distracted. So once those two things are covered, you want to think about your posture. So right now, I'm sitting up straight, I'm focusing right in on you at the camera. Now, think if you're the employer on the other end and I was beginning to slouch. It looks like I'm not interested, I'm lazy, and I really just want to get this over with. Make sure you're sitting up tall. Again, keeping those hands folded will keep you balanced. Finally, my last tip in the conduct phase is being enthused about the position when you talk about it. A smile goes a long way. For example, if you're about to say to an employer, I'm really excited about this opportunity, that says a lot about how you feel. But let's change it, let's add a smile. I'm really excited about this opportunity. The employer will then feel your emotions and know that you are excited to join their team. Now, moving on to our final factor, which is number 3, which is follow-up. So you should always treat a Skype or a FaceTime interview as you would an in-person interview. Make sure that at the end of your interview, when you're signing off, logging off, and saying goodbye, that you fully end the call. My tip to you is make sure it's fully shut down by exiting out, or if you're still not sure, just restart your system, whatever you're using, whether it's a computer, phone, or iPad. And then just a basic follow-up. You should do this via email as you would after any interview. Remind the employer the interview type you had, let them know any contact information, and send along any documents they may have requested. Again, treat them as you would if you were meeting them face-to-face in their office. So this concludes our short video on how to prepare for a Skype or FaceTime interview. If you have
Okay. Simple enough. Later on, if we have time, I want to leave as much time as possible for questions. We do have a Skype interview gone wrong, but that I think you can sort of figure out where it is. Now, moving along. Another important thing to do is to research the firm or the institution that you are applying for. Part of the preparation is to know enough about the firm to show your interest so that you can actually make a good statement to the firm, or to ask questions that are acceptable but not, freak them out. Another reason is certain places have dress codes, and so if you know the dress code, then you can match your attire to that. Like for instance, I found out that the Cook County State's Attorney's Office had a dress code. You had to wear a white, this is for guys, white dress shirt with a medium to dark blue tie. You could not wear any other color. So, of course, if you were to apply for that position, If you come in already wearing their uniform, you're one up rather than if you come with a yellow tie. But it was never prosecuted, never applied. But I did hire several and face them in the courtroom. So again, that's why researching can also be important to give you that little edge of finding out, you know, what do people dress like in this firm. Nowadays in particular, things are in flux. There's business casual. A lot of places are doing away with ties or with women's clothing. Some of the sites that give at the end talk about scarves and other accessories. And again, it all depends. I don't have much experience with that, so you're going to have to do your own research on that, but the more research you do, it's going to look better. Now, next, you should look at this handout. Whoops. From the ABA Young Lawyers Association, American Bar Association, and let's turn to page 2. And it says, doing your homework on a firm's website and literature is not enough. If you're targeting a law firm, it's always good practice to review the marketing materials. Don't stop there. These sources may give you background information. If an interviewer asks you questions about the firm, it is never a good idea to say, no, it's okay, I read your website, you don't need to tell me. If they want to give you some information, you ask for it, but if you are given the chance to show that you already know the information, do it in a positive way, not like, I read your website, you know, it's not that interesting. Let's see. Research, but don't frighten your interviewers. You may be told in advance who your interviewers will be. When I interview a candidate, I am impressed when the person has found reported decisions for matters I've handled and is interested in discussing those cases. I am unnerved when someone brings up my place of birth, the names of my family members, or my home address. So don't go out and like stalk who you're interviewing, who is interviewing you, I should say. And then, again, consider the culture of the target employer. This goes again to personality, dress codes, etc. that I've already discussed. And the key is show a long-term interest. Young associates' questions are often limited to such immediate concerns as the employer's system for handing out assignments and for providing merit reviews, feedback, and training. Questions about possibilities for advancement and for a law firm, the necessary steps for partnership show that you're there, want to be there a long time. And so that is someone that they go, okay, we're willing to invest in this person because they're going to be here a long time. They're not just looking to come in and hop around from this job to another. Now, you should always have several questions prepared to ask your interviewer if you are given the opportunity. Most of the time, they will ask you if you have any questions. Sometimes they will have already covered a question you wanted to ask by giving you information. That's why I always say, have several ready. That doesn't necessarily mean you have to ask all 7, but have several ready. Now, if you don't have any questions, that can be interpreted as lack of interest or lack of drive or laziness, and you know that's not necessarily the case. So prepare questions, and you can come up with standard questions that are kind of easy. But you always want to be 100% correct about the terminology and pronunciation that you're using. So if you're asking about the firm, make sure you know exactly how the name partners' names are pronounced, so as not to mispronounce someone's name. That could be a biggie. I'm always bad at mispronouncing names. I know why. I mispronounce my own name half the time, that's why. But, again, don't have it be like a script of questions. You know, I usually weed people out when I see them, especially on Skype, and do you have any questions? And they go, yes. I would like to ask you, you know, it's obviously they're reading off of something that they've pre-prepared, you know. Again, your questions to them should be the same as your answers to them. They should be kind of like this, a normal conversation that's off the top of the head, maintaining eye contact, keeping proper posture, looking at the camera, whatever. But again, if you prepared this material in advance, perhaps practiced it out loud, like I keep saying, you should do it with everything, it will seem natural rather than, like I said, literally I'm like, have we lost the connection? Because it looked like the camera had frozen and they're actually reading the answer that's taped to the side of their monitor, which is not a good thing to do. Let's see, what was it? I have to admit, sometimes I've been caught off guard by questions that surprisingly hit on something that I would be surprised that people would know about. One person actually asked a question that I thought was surely a setup by one of my colleagues, because it was a topic that I know very well, and was like, not very people knew that topic, and so it was very odd that this person chose one of my pet peeves about this institution and seemed to know it, because very few people knew it. But because of, I then followed up on that and found out that the person genuinely had reached that conclusion on their own. That person got hired. So the question you ask might be the hook that hooks the interviewer to actually hire you, rather than the questions they ask you. So that's why I always say, come prepared with some interesting questions that are specific to that particular entity you're interviewing with. Don't always use the same 5 questions. Okay? Now, again, just because you have several questions, you don't want to ask more questions than they've asked you. You don't want to extend the time period. 1 or 2 questions, 3, that's probably the max, unless they ask you. But sometimes they might be asking you just to be polite, so don't keep going and asking 27 questions. That will not help your case. Now, let's see what we got next is researching. Of course, how can we miss Harvard? They do everything right.
In order to prepare for an interview, it's important to research in 3 areas. First area that you want to research is you. You want to research yourself, basically a summary of your qualifications, your relevant qualifications. You want to ask yourself how you can meet the employer's needs, what you bring to the table, and how you can add value. Then you also want to make sure that you research the position. You want to have a clear understanding of what an XYZ does. Okay? Again, meeting the needs of the position. You also want to research the employer. So they may say, why do you want to work for us? What do you know about us? So who's the CEO, history, products, services, competitors, etc. And then finally, I would say that you want to research the industry as well. So you, the position, the organization, and the industry. You want to make sure that you've prepared a series of short, relevant stories, okay, about yourself. It's something called the show and tell method. So you don't just want to say, like, these are my skills. You want to be able to demonstrate, to have short, relevant stories that have a beginning, a middle, and an end. I would recommend that you practice. At the very least, lock yourself in a room with a mirror and...
I didn't make it up. I did make up. The mirror thing, I didn't get from them. I didn't go to Harvard. I turned them down, went to Northwestern. But see, the mirror thing is actually taught by many people. So it's not just something I came up with. So do it. It really makes a difference. Trust me.
Practice responses to commonly asked questions. You don't want to script it. You're not an actress. You want it to be conversational, but you want to hear yourself say these responses out loud. And if possible, I would recommend that you set up a mock interview with a professional career counselor. You want to make sure that you arrive on time. I generally say arrive 30 minutes in the vicinity, but about 10 to 15 minutes to announce yourself in the reception area. Then once you meet your interviewer, first impressions matter, and studies say it takes about 7 seconds. A prospective employer is immediately sizing you up. He or she is deciding, do they like you? Are you intelligent? Are you kind? Okay. You want to have good eye contact. You want to have a nice, strong handshake. And you basically want to be positive, confident, and upbeat. So watch your energy level. You want to be authentic and genuine, but most people need to turn up the volume slightly. There are basically 3 types of interviews. Some common interviews are now behavioral interviews. They begin with questions like, tell me about a time when. Tell me about a time when you were in a team and things went really well or things didn't go so well. You might have a technical interview. This might be perhaps you're going for a software engineering position. You might walk into the interview and they say, don't sit down, and they direct you to a whiteboard, give you a marker, and they want you to solve some algorithms. Perhaps you will have a case interview if you're interviewing with consulting firms, so you want to be well prepared for those in terms of practicing case questions. Telephone and Skype interviews are becoming more and more common, particularly for initial interviews. With a telephone interview, if you can get a landline, that's best. If not, make sure everything is charged up. You also want to make sure that you're in a quiet environment and that no one is going to disturb you. So the advantage is you don't have to worry about what you're wearing or what you look like. And you can have lots of notes, but you want to be organized. You want to make sure that you pace yourself, the tone, your articulation, that the energy comes forth within the telephone call. With a Skype interview, again, you want to test your equipment, make sure everything is working properly. You need to think about what you're wearing because you're going to be on camera. Have something colorful. Watch the whites, the blacks, the patterns, etc. Watch the lighting in terms of like fluorescent lighting with a Skype interview. And even though it might be your natural inclination to look at the screen, it's important to look at the camera. That's how you'll be making eye contact. And then finally, with a Skype interview, I would watch your background. Be very much aware of your background. So at the end of the interview, I would recommend that you establish next steps. Some employers will tell you what the next steps are, but if they don't, it's perfectly fine to ask what are the next steps. I would also recommend that you have a closing statement at the end of the interview to let the interviewer know that you're very interested in the position and why you would be a great fit and match. Then in terms of once the interview is over, of course you want to send some type of thank you. It's probably going to be an email, but depending upon your audience, could be a short thank you note. In your thank you, you want to make sure, of course, that you thank the interviewer for their time, but also it's an opportunity to reiterate your interest and your qualifications. And I recommend that you send the thank you within 24 to 48 hours.
Okay, simple enough. Now, social media. That's becoming more and more a thing now. Just like you're researching for firms, the firms are researching you. The interviewers are researching your accounts, your social media accounts, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, etc. Be conscious of the handles, the names you use. Keep in mind that people viewing images and posts do not have the benefit of you explaining, well, this is, a parody, or this is a costume show or whatever. They might get the wrong impression from something. We have a video about that. But I'll say also, be conscious of things like your profile picture. If they're older pictures, maybe make them more professional. And again, as you'll see in the video, be aware of older pictures that are on from maybe your college days and learn those privacy settings on Facebook. Now let's see if we have that video. Yes, we do.
Okay, I just want to make you aware we do a very light background check of all of our prospective employees. Something that a quick Google search would reveal about you. I don't want to say that any red flags popped up, especially because Mr. Buchwald recommended you so highly. Oh, but sorry if I bring up your Facebook profile here. Yeah. I guess my first question is about your profile picture.
The one of me and my mother? God, I love her. I had that picture framed on my mantle.
It's you naked doing a cake stand holding, just brandishing what appears to be a live snake.
Yeah, no, my mom is in that picture. She's holding up my legs. It's my cousin's christening.
Oh, I'll tell you what, there she is. Cousin's christening?
Yeah, little Anthony.
Okay, well, maybe you could shed some light onto this album, the full photo album in which you are draped in nothing but the Italian flag, snorting cocaine with your friends, watching Life is Beautiful on a television set, and you're fully erect, I might add.
It's taken completely out of context. It was a photo essay for the school zine, so that's all that was.
I suppose we're mostly curious why you chose to share that album with every member of 1 Million Strong for Cancer Research.
Just stupid privacy settings. I don't know.
Well, there must be some explanation for this video where you're spraying a 10-year-old boy with a garden hose until he chugs a Smirnoff Ice on one knee.
Yeah, I ice blocked him. The kid's dead now anyway. Unrelated incident.
This is you giving something called a stone cold stunner to what appears to be a vagrant.
I'm giving a British bulldog to, what, yes, he's a homeless person.
I feel the need to tell you that my assistant filed for workers' compensation after she saw this next photo of you and the girl from Precious.
What is this, a Ponzi scheme or something? Where are the cameras?
Okay, I'm sorry, I don't know what that means.
Hey.
That's Fonzie.
You're thinking of Potsy.
Potsy's in Happy Days. Fonzie is who you just impersonated. Ponzi scheme is a way to extort money from you.
Okay, well, looks like we jumped the whale.
All right. Please leave.
Okay. I've won 4 J.D. Power and Associates awards.
Get out of my office.
an extreme example, probably not going to happen to you, but how many of us know what pictures we have out there from many, many years ago that our friends might have posted where we're tagged? Keep track of that and learn those privacy settings. Now, the flip side of this, what if you don't have Facebook? What if you don't have LinkedIn? What if you don't have Twitter, Instagram? Have I missed anything? There used to be MySpace, that's gone now. And I don't know, there's a dual-edged sword to that. Oftentimes people say, why in this day and age does someone not have a social media account? What are they hiding? On the other hand, I have hired at least 3 individuals who had no Facebook page, no LinkedIn, no nothing, and had a very almost non-existent digital footprint before they became lawyers or solicitors or barristers. So it's not a bar, but if you have it, make sure it's updated. Because in recent years, people are looking at it, and they're always going to err on the side of why don't they have LinkedIn, or like in my case, make sure your LinkedIn is updated. When I was actually showing my age, I was around when LinkedIn first came around, and it really wasn't used by anyone. So I logged on, made an account, and decided there's nothing here, and didn't touch LinkedIn for years, until then I applied for a position, and they're like, well, you have a conflict of interest because you work for such and such firm. And I'm like, I haven't worked for them in years. But your LinkedIn says, and I'm like, LinkedIn, what's that? I'd forgotten what it was. Didn't know my password. I had to go on and get in there, and lo and behold, it's got my old law firm. So I had to change all that information. Eventually I got the job, but the point being that was a sense of nervousness that I did not need to experience had I kept my LinkedIn updated. People do that, and they'll do it sometimes anonymously. So keep that all in mind. I mentioned, I think earlier today, do not lie in your resume, do not lie in your interview, do not overextend anything beyond what you are actually capable of. I'll give you 2 examples. Actually, I think it comes up in the video as well. I've had an interview applicant claiming fluency in both English and French. Now, I have nothing against Francophones or French language speakers. I studied the language for 7 years, and I used to be fluent in it, a little less now. But at that point in time, most of the other people on my team were English. And so in terms of the quick pace of what we needed to do, a very strong command of the English language was necessary. This person not only was not fluent, but was not answering my questions. So obviously was not understanding my questions in English. And so don't, if you're weak on a language, admit that weakness. Don't, try to fake it. Second story, and this was major. And again, it's a small world in the legal community. Someone was applying to become a member of the ADC and therefore be eligible to be hired on cases here, again, at this institution, whatever it was called at the time. And they put down that they had worked on a particular team, and more importantly, they said they were primarily responsible for drafting the final trial brief for that team, which surprised me, because I was on the same case as that team, and more importantly, I might have helped them with parts of their brief, even though we were co-accused in the case, and that entire support staff moved with me to another case to help me on my appeal, so I was pretty familiar with everyone who had worked on that team, and I didn't know this individual. I gave the benefit of the doubt and contacted my colleague who contacted all the other colleagues that might have assisted us, and nobody knew who this person was. They had just made it up. Don't ever do that. Because once that word gets out in the community, you're not going to get hired. So if you did something on a case that was minimal, don't oversell it. Like, I drafted most of it. In this particular scenario, the person absolutely had no role in the team, so they completely made it But I'm saying if you perhaps assisted with researching something, then say, I assisted researching, not I drafted the whole thing. But again, you'll be surprised with what people will try and do. I have another example of actually one of my colleagues sitting down with a lawyer who asked him, he asked him what does he do, and this person spent 15 minutes telling my colleague that he's representing someone here in The Hague, and then asked my colleague, well, what do you do? And my colleague's like, well, I'm lead counsel for that person, so I don't know who you are, but you're definitely not on my team. And that person just got up and left. So don't lie. And that's the next video, I think.
What not to do in a job interview. A job today, we know that anyone can have a bad interview. Oh, this guy.
We're a French restaurant, and I see from your CV that you speak fluent French.
Yeah.
Very impressed. Me too.
Don't lie on your CV too much.
Vous avez tellement utile à l'entreprise que vous parlez français aussi.
Je m'appelle moi grâce grande et tu es prêt pour le dimanche au prochain et celui de toi. Oui, petit fleur et masse.
You don't speak French at all, do you?
Oui. Also, we can't do the interview for you.
We'll let you know.
With our brand new Job Today CV feature and thousands of...
I think I would read the ad, but you get the point. If it's something like language, you can really run into that and run into trouble. Now, the rest of the handout, again, that we were looking at for the ABA talks about having a writing sample and how to dress for the interview, preparing your resume, etc. That's all great. You can read that in your own time. Let's see. Other things to keep in mind. This is a big one. Do not trash talk your prior employer, even if you have really hated your prior employer for whatever reason, probably a valid reason. Because, it's a small world and people will check back and everyone knows everyone. And again, if your previous employer was someone who has a bad reputation, I probably know about it, so I'm not going to, take that into account. I'm not going to put you on the spot about it. But by the same token, oftentimes decisions are made very quickly based upon reputation. So, for instance, I've had at least 2 occasions where, for big cases, before, let's say, the ICC, very high-level British chambers, I guess they're called, will contact me through a colleague and say, hey, one of your people has applied, one of my former interns or assistants has applied, and they don't want to ask, what I think of them. They just say yes or no. As in, if you say yes, we're going to hire them. If you say no, we won't. Because we know we're all busy and we're, in the same field, and those of us that know each other know how to value that appraisal. So literally, a yes or no answer from me, your former employer, could determine whether you, my former employee, are hired on a very important case. So that's happened at least 3 times. It's a small world. We all kind of are, we're all at least one email or phone call away from your next employer, in theory, if it's international law. Okay? Now, things never to do in an interview. Let's see. This is a big one, an important one, and I've had it come up a couple times. If there is something that you know about that prevents you from accepting employment if offered, or might affect your ability to start working right away, be upfront with that person interviewing you. All too often, I've seen where people want to kind of play both ends, and they already have a job offer, and they've committed to that job offer, and then they're still interviewing, hoping to get a better job, and so they'll say that there's, and they'll get 2 job offers, and then they'll have to tell someone, I'm sorry, I'm not able to come, work for you, and then that person or that firm is left hanging because they've told all the other people, I'm sorry, we found a candidate, and that candidate is no longer available. Again, it's a small community, and if you do that, that job will be your last job in the community. Because word will get around that you're not reliable, and so don't, kind of, and again, it might not be a problem. So if you say, just before we get started, just so you know, I have this 2-month obligation to teach, somewhere in Tibet or wherever, so I might be missing work if it starts in this month. Most employers will appreciate that honesty, and if they really want you, they will find a way to make it work. Like I did, for several people, the CCC wanted them to stay for a few more months in Chambers. We accommodated them. There was another example, I can't remember where someone had to come later than usual. We accommodated them. And so, again, do not kind of mislead someone by saying, oh, I could start tomorrow, if you know you can't start tomorrow. Okay? That's, I think, one of the biggest no-nos. To be smart. I've been talking a long time. I guess we do have time for the Skype interview going wrong. No, let's do questions first. Let's go back to the PowerPoint. Well, this is the handout that's mistakes to avoid. Oh, sorry, you have a question?
I was wondering, at what time do you have to tell them that you cannot start at the time that they want you to start? Do you tell them during interview or much more before?
Only when it becomes known to you, because you might not know when they want you to start. So that's typically one of the questions that you should have prepared is, if I am accepted for this job, when would I need to be available? And then if they say, well, we're expecting you to start, September 1st, then you say, well, I want to make you aware of the fact that unfortunately September 1st through the end of September, I have pre-engaged because I have, I'm finishing a whatever, PhD, master's, whatever. So as soon as you find out about the potential conflict of time, you want to make it known to them.
And what if it's in the job description? Do you start with it at the beginning of the
If it's in the job description, you do want to say, I want to be frank and honest with you up front, even because I don't know how strict your job description is and how accurate it is, but I have a competing obligation. It's this, but I still am very interested in working for you. And again, if you do everything else right, that might not matter, because job descriptions aren't always updated, shall we say. And like I said, I've waited months for people because I felt that they were the right fit for the team. And so yes, if it's in the job description, get it out there right away, because you don't want people to kind of, and they'll let you know right away whether it's a problem or not. You don't want to wait until half an hour into the interview.
Kind of like self-sabotaging yourself. If you say it right away, it's kind of like you're kind of like taking yourself away already.
Well, you're being honest though. But well, if you're unavailable though, you've already.
Yeah, but then they're biased, because then they're gonna be like, oh, this person is unavailable for that certain month or whatever. So like the interest of the interview will be less.
It depends. It depends on if they really need someone at that time period, which you don't know.
But they would, like let's imagine there are like 10 candidates.
Yeah.
As much as like I go there, I cannot start before January, and then they're looking for somebody in December. With other candidates, they would be like, okay, you can be the perfect fit, but if I need somebody earlier, like I would rather sell myself first and then tell them. I think, otherwise it's kind of like a self.
Yeah, but then you're gonna lose credibility with them if you can't.
No, like at the end of the interview, not as the first thing. You know what I mean?
Oh,
like,
well.
yeah, that's my point.
It's a risk to take. Let's put it that way. I have skipped 10 people and waited for the person if I felt that they were the right person. So.
But wouldn't
if
it
they're
be kind
upfront
of
with me.
through, like you would be like less interested in if a candidate if it tells you right away? Like, would you have the same attention to get to them?
Yes.
Yeah, you're being honest, no?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm not saying that it's
It,
not
the,
a good thing.
it's basically a risk
like,
you have to
I
take.
wouldn't say as a first thing. I would probably like, do I?
Yeah, maybe not like hello, I'm not available for you.
Exactly, that's my point.
But
yeah.
early on, my point is you don't want to like get to the point where you're doing your second round of interviews and then you tell them, But I think if everything else aligns, if it's a short time period that you're unavailable, most of the time they will accommodate. Now again, if they really need someone for that time period, they're going to be grateful that you let them know, because here's the caveat. If they like you and they appreciate your honesty, and that saves them from spending time considering you because they really need someone the first of the month, they'll still give you credit, and they'll keep you in mind for when their friend asks, hey, do you know anyone available? And they'll go, well, there was this person that I interviewed last week that didn't fit me because of the time frame, but they might be able for you because you have more flexible time zone. Because again, we talk amongst each other. So that honesty could help you perhaps with another firm, and you might get another perhaps better job. But definitely, if you go through the whole process and they're ready to have you come in and you don't come in, that's a no. We've had that happen as well, where someone decided not to show up on the first day of their internship. They're like, oh, I could get in the next day or two. The head of office didn't even let me make a decision. Right away, she's like, I'm sorry, your internship's canceled. Don't bother coming in. Now, that person did then go to another team, and that team hired them. But again, that was the last time they had a job at this institution. You had a question?
My question concerns the salary, or the bargain when they ask like how much.
Yeah,
you gonna
that's
get.
always a difficult one.
For me, it's always seems problematic for one reason, because where I'm from in Hungary, sometimes they don't give you a big salary in the beginning.
Correct.
And if I would be an interviewer, I would purposely say less money, because I want to see if the individual is standing up for themselves, or what's the reaction, or just hire or just takes whatever it gets. Because I think if you are a lawyer, you have to stand up for yourself. So I would love to see that, but I don't know what's the nature of this conversation.
That comes down to, again, researching cultural differences and jurisdictional differences, as I call them. I'm always upfront with people about what I'm able to offer them, and what, whether it's paid, unpaid, what my limitations are, and to see whether that works for them. Because again, I don't want to be wasting their time if they can't even consider what I'm offering them because of living conditions, etc. So I personally try to be fair with the person I'm interviewing. But again, if someone mentions something, even if I say, this is what I can offer, I will not be upset if someone asks, yes, but I really need this, could you work this out? And again, sometimes I do have flexibility where I can be like, okay, maybe not right away, but we can perhaps do that because I know one other person is leaving, so I'll have funds available in a month or something. So you can always bring it up, irrespective of whether someone's challenging you and seeing whether you're going to react or whether they're being honest like I would. There's no problem with following up with a counter offer. But salary is always a touchy subject to ask, but don't be afraid to ask it, because of course, for you guys, it's very important to know whether there is a salary, first of all, and if it's something that will sustain you. So don't shy away from that, but try and find a way of not making it be your first question, and perhaps when they bring up the salary, don't ask it then, but wait until the end and say, we mentioned salary and you mentioned this amount, and I've been thinking about it, and I'd like to see if there's any flexibility there because of, and then come up with some reason. I have more experience than most people. I have a specific skill or whatever. There should be some justification for why you're bringing it up again, or just say, is there any flexibility on that long term? Is there a chance for advancement, for instance? Because again, that shows interest that, I want to stay with you for a long time, so, would you invest more in maybe to keep me rather than hiring and training someone new every couple of months? So it can work in your favor. But, I guess some interviewers might want to see how you challenge. That might be their question, to see how well you fight for yourself. Mine is simple enough as, what's your favorite color? Because that's usually enough to throw people off. But yeah, it could be a trick question that they give you a low ball figure. And so if you know that, and especially if you know that from like let's say a cultural perspective, use that to your advantage. See, that's something I don't know. I've never. It's actually the first time I've heard that when it comes to salary, but I can see that happening.
It would be my thing.
There you go.
It would
See,
be my
so
thing.
now everyone knows in this room something that no one else would know. And that again, that's where you have to realize that everyone might use the same language or the same technique, but it's different from jurisdiction and place to place, and you have to learn how things work in a particular jurisdiction where you're applying to try to follow the rules or meet the rules or do the best for yourself. I promised you 2 updated websites. These are the ones. We can give them the printout, can't we?
Mm-hmm.
These are ones that are dated. Well, these are from the 20th of November of 2019, which I believe was either yesterday or the day before. I lose track of dates. Giving you the most current trends for what you should and should not wear. And again, I don't know that I agree with all of them, but everyone has their own kind of thing. And I say, be comfortable. Don't be too flashy. They always talk about avoiding very bright colors and very bold ties or bold colored garments. Everyone always talks about wearing like a darker, gray or blue blazer, even for female candidates. I don't know. I mean, I'm someone who's less interested in how you look as opposed to what you present in terms of your intellect and the entire package. But unfortunately, I can't say that all my colleagues who are interviewing for legal positions are always that way, and even some judges. We had a particular judge that you had to be properly attired to even appear before the judge and make submissions, and even like forgetting to take off your overcoat in the winter was not properly attired. Not having your tie all the way up and fully buttoned was not properly attired. So some people are sticklers for these things. So research, but again, wear something comfortable because you don't want to be sitting there and having like your shirt button like shoot off and hit the interviewer on the head. If it does, try to turn it into a joke, an apology and joke or something, because you don't want that to like be the thing that stalls you, because it happens to all of us. I've had it happen when you sit down and you hear your pants rip or something. It happens. You get stuck in the chair handles. It happens to everyone. So it's a very human thing, and most people will understand. So don't let that derail you from what you had planned on presenting or doing. Okay. Questions? No questions. I've answered everything.
The thing with hand gestures, right? One video they were saying like keep your hands below the desk,
Mhm.
and others say you should show them. What do you think is the most appropriate? Or like
Middle ground. Not too many hand gestures. Not to the point where it's distracting. The hand gesture should be more like controlled toward the middle, okay, and limited. And again, I think the default position should be something like this.
so
And
on the table.
on the table, even on a Skype interview, because I think below the table, look what I'm doing. I'm slouching forward, and that is an uncomfortable position to be in. So I don't necessarily think that that was a proper advice. And plus, I think it's easier when your hands are on the table. They'll see it, and that's usually the procedure that people expect to see. Because if they don't see your arms, again, it all depends on how fidgety you are. If you really need to hide your hands because you're constantly, fidgeting with them, then do under the table. But as I've just demonstrated, when I go under the table, I'm no longer in a proper posture, in a comfortable position. I'm uncomfortable, and therefore my answers are going to be strained, and I'm not going to come off the best in definitely in a live interview, but Skype also. So find what you are comfortable with, and that's why I said it's always good to practice in front of a mirror, because then you'll see how it looks, and you'll kind of adjust how you do things to how you feel is comfortable. And again, if you find 10 different experts, they might say 10 different things about hand gestures. Let's put it this way, if you do everything else right, so long as your hand gestures are not like, punching the interviewer, you're okay. Or yourself. I've seen people that will try to punch themselves to kind of remind themselves of something. That's also not a good technique, but some people do it. So anything that kind of seems relaxed and normal is fine. But again, if it seems like you're doing these gestures to fake something, then it becomes obvious. So anything that is familiar, comfortable, and seems like a normal anticipated gesture, given what you're talking about, it's okay. And again, you might have something in your eye. You gotta clean your eye, or take off your glasses and clean your glasses or something. Those are all fine. Your hair might be. My hair is always like sometimes dripping down or falling down in my eyes, and I have to, move it over my ears. That's all fine. Anything that is a kind of a genuine gesture is fine. Anything that's exaggerated will be looked at as distracting. So I think if you try it out a few times, you'll see what fits and works for you. And that's why I say practice is so important. And that's why even like I tell people, if you have a chance to get an interview, even if you're 100% positive that you're not going to get the job or you don't want the job, take the interview, because it's a free shot to get experience and get comfortable with your interview technique and with your presentation. When you have nothing to lose. Worst case scenario, they offer you the job, you turn it down because you don't want it. Or you take it because, hey, I got a job I didn't even think I was going to get. So the more time and experience you can have doing interviews, the more fluid and practiced you'll be, the less nervous you'll be. Because let's face it, interviews are always nervous, irrespective of how nice or mean an interviewer is. Okay?
That brings me to my second question. Is it appropriate, let's say you were not offered the position, but would it still be appropriate to ask the person whether they can give you some tips or feedback? I have had friends who emailed the employee or employer about this.
Yes, so long as it's not persistent or creepy or clingy. I don't know how to explain it.
Yeah.
I've actually had an interesting experience where someone asked like how they could do the interview better because they assumed that they'd not been hired. I actually had hired them, but I knew that the letters had not yet gone out, so I didn't want to tell them. So they were surprised to find out they'd been hired. But yeah, I will give advice to people usually if I have time, or I'll say you were fine, just keep at it. It just came down to too many people for the same position. So I think most interviewers will not have a problem with it so long as it's not like a long, lengthy. Tell me everything I did wrong. Why did you take me? Who did you pick? Just keep it simple and say, thank you for the. Thank you for the interview. I would very much appreciate feedback. Any feedback you might have as to my interview skills and anything I need to work on. Thank you very much, and that's it. Thanks in advance for anything, so you're not like expecting something. And I think, let's say 80% of the interviewers will probably get back to you with something, or someone from the organization will get back to you with something, which may not be as constructive as, there are times when I'm more constructive than others. If there's someone that was really close and there's one little thing, I might be more helpful towards them. If it's someone that, I could spend all day and I could not help them, I might only tell them a few things and not all of them because I just don't have the time. But I typically would always get back to someone. So I would not have a problem with that. But again, I unfortunately am not every interviewer or employer in the world, so don't be surprised if someone doesn't answer you. But again, if they haven't hired you, there's no harm in asking a question.
Yeah. Just in the future, to know.
Yeah, exactly, just in the future to know, And they might be honest and tell you something that, is really simple that you haven't thought about, that you can really easily fix. When I say fix, just change. It's not that there's something wrong with you, it's just that, there's something that they picked up on that the other person won't pick up on, and so it's still you. It's not, you should never change yourself. It's just what are people looking at that you're not conscious of, that is making a difference to them. It's really them. Okay. You had a question, I think?
I would like to come back to the salary question.
Yes.
What if, how would you deal with the question if they are asking you what kind of salary are you seeking? How would you prepare that question?
If I were asking what kind of salary is the person that I'm interviewing seeking? Well, it depends a lot on if I know what my budget is. Oftentimes I do, sometimes I don't. So if I do, I would say, just to let you know, right now with the budget that we have at present, the maximum we can probably offer you is in the range of X to Y. Wanted to check with you whether that is something that you would consider, or whether it's not feasible for you. Start the dialogue. If I have a more leeway or something, I might say, look, I don't know yet what budget we'll be able to offer to you, but it would assist me greatly if you could give me kind of a range of what your needs and expectations are. Because again, needs are one thing, expectations are another. And oftentimes the two are not in the same ballpark even. But that's how I would usually kind of approach it.
But what if you really don't know, like what kind of salary to expect?
Now, you're talking now from the aspect of the person who's interviewing for a job, or?
The person who's being interviewed.
Got you. See, I was doing it the other way, that's why I asked. If you really don't know, well, you can research, and most of the time you can find out what the, kind of like the average salary is in a particular firm. Ask around. You can usually find somebody who knows somebody in a firm. And unfortunately, in today's day and age, especially if it's international organizations, a lot of times they're posted. The salaries are rather low. They're G level, P level, so you can kind of tell what the salary is going to be. And sadly, if it's an internship, more often than not, they're unpaid. So you can kind of know, but there's no problem asking. Well, what would a average salary be for somebody in my position at your firm? So you're not necessarily asking for what your salary would be, what the average would be. And then they'll probably, if they're honest, come back to you and say, well, the average is this, but of course, starting out, there's a smaller salary of this much, but we do offer, 401k or other benefits, extra vacation time. My brother works for a place where they have a shortened work schedule of less than, I forget what it is, I think it's less than 40 hours a week, which sounded great, but he still works over 40 hours a week. So that might not be accurate information they give you, but it's some information that allows you to make an educated decision. Okay? Anyone else with questions? Okay. I wish you all good luck. I hope this was of some benefit to you. And again, there's a lot more articles out there. Spend an afternoon on Google, and you'll probably find a lot more that I also have. And also, by all means, do they have my email?
Can distribute it.
You can distribute it. If you were afraid to ask a question or something comes into your mind later, email me, and when I get a chance, I will respond to you. Okay?
Thank you so much.
Good luck.
Thank you.